How may I help you, officer?
By resisting arrest.
Don't count on it, chum. Anyway, what's the charge?
The murder of Ann Lewis.
Good evening, I'm Casey Wong. Our top story tonight: Motor City goes Japanese as the Omni Consumer Products Corporation ended months of speculation today by announcing its takeover by the multinational Kanamitsu Corporation. Meet the Rehabs, Urban Rehabilitation Officers.
We're here to help the people, to augment the police force and deal with the gang problem.
What about reports you're actually ousting people from their homes to make way for construction of Delta City? God's sake, help us!
That's what we're here for, man.
I won't deny we're serving an eviction notice or two, but we're just helping them make the transition, that's all. We're cops, nothing more.
Nothing more?
Well, we're not robots, if that's what you mean.
Stay right there.
We're police officers.
We don't want you. We have reason to believe there are squatters in that structure. Now step away from the door.
There's civilians inside. They're just trying to stay warm.
Those people belong in the nearest rehabilitation center. Some of them are armed terrorists.
Back off, or there will be trouble.
We're not budging. If you want to get in there, you're going to have to shoot through us.
I don't have a huge problem with that.
In late November of 1993, RoboCop 3 finally got released, after sitting on the shelf for over a year. Orion Pictures had originally scheduled the movie for a release in the summer of 1992. In the early 90s, Orion were suffering from a number of box office flops, and they had invested large sums of money into producing shows for television. Despite two massive box office hits, like Dances with Wolves and Silence of the Lambs, it wasn't enough to cover the mounting debts. RoboCop 3 had a reported budget of $22 million, and went into production shortly after RoboCop 2 was released, with Orion facing bankruptcy. It's obviously clear they wanted a more family-friendly movie to help increase box office takings, to reduce the pressure on their debts. After doing some research, they realised many kids were watching these R-rated movies and wanted to provide something aimed at that age range. But with the watered-down violence came backlash from the fans of the original, and the film only managed to recoup about half its budget back, and reviews were often average to very negative. The film was released in May of that year before the United States in Japan, and proved to be very successful. However, we in the UK didn't get the movie till June of 1994. If you lived in the UK, you may have seen some adverts with Robo holding a very strange gun. Fred Dekker came on as the director, having previously directed Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad. Both movies have huge followings now, but at the time they didn't find their audiences. However, Orion felt Fred was the right guy for the job, because both movies incorporated all the elements needed for their new RoboCop film. Fred apparently had a lot of freedom on the production. I think with Orion dealing with their finances, they weren't going to micromanage RoboCop 3, and left the team to it. Frank Miller wasn't happy with the results of his work on RoboCop 2. A lot of his work was changed, but he soldiered on and wrote the screenplay to RoboCop 3. Fred and Frank did get on well, but over time Frank has certainly blamed Fred for the movie's quality, and he felt he ruined his script. In publication at the moment, there is a RoboCop comic series called The Last Stand, which is based on Frank Miller's original script. I've read through 6 issues, and to be honest, there are many elements that Fred used in the film. The structure of the comic is all there on the screen, but unfortunately Frank's dark tone has not been translated over. The rehab team were introduced at the beginning of Frank's original RoboCop 2 script, and have a stronger presence in that story than in Frank's RoboCop 3 script. Also, the additional gun attachment looks more like a chain gun than an all-in-one flamethrower, machine gun and rocket launcher. The rocket flying pack is in Miller's version as well, and there are a number of characters whose roles are swapped around in the movie. Dr. Lazarus is Lacasse in the comics, and she is more like Nico, but not a 12-year-old girl. She feels she has a strong connection to Murphy, and being very intelligent, she assists Robo throughout the story, and repairs him in a scene just like in the film. If you get a chance to read it, you will be surprised how much is taken from the original draft. for Fred Decker's screenplay, with Peter Weller declining to play RoboCop again and instead making Naked Lunch with David Cronenberg. In steps Robert John Burke. To give the guy credit, he certainly looks a lot like Peter Weller with the mask off, and he does make great attempts to try and move in a robotic fashion. The majority of the time he does it very successfully, even though when standing still he has his arms hanging out like he's trying to maintain his balance. But the biggest problem with his performance is his voice. I remember when he first spoke, I was like, he doesn't sound like RoboCop, and the extra effect they added to his voice was so over the top. He sounded more like a robot than ever before, and when he first shows up his mouth is often out of focus. Maybe the focus puller wasn't paying attention. The villains are really the central characters to the film. Rip Torn plays the new boss of OCP, and in his usual fashion he shouts out all his dialogue, which in my opinion makes the film more bearable by providing some extra laughs.
Flick!
Sir?
You're in charge of security concepts. Where's that RoboCop we spent so much money on? You're fired. You heard me, Flick. You're fired. Get out of here. We don't fire police officers. You're out of line, McDaggett. I'm still in charge here. I'm pulling the plug.
Sit down.
What, you going war wacky?
I said sit down.
Good idea.
John Castle, I think, is probably the best actor in the movie, and he clearly doesn't give a toss and just sails through it. It's funny how he uses the word chum all the time, like that's how British people talk. I don't think I've ever called someone chum. He plays his character so cool and calm, I think he could easily run the Death Star no problem. With Frank Miller being a huge fan of ninjas and samurais, he introduced Otomo. He's basically a Japanese take on the Terminator. The actor playing him was Bruce Locke, who apparently had no training in martial arts and had to go through a 2-month training course with a stunt and martial arts expert. A lot of his scenes were shot at night on location in freezing Atlanta, and in interviews he said he struggled to maintain his composure on set. Nancy Allen returns as Lewis, but would only do the film if she could be killed off. Now, I believe the secret of her death was already known to many before they even saw the film, which takes away any suspense or surprise in the movie. Fred Decker said it would have been interesting to introduce Lewis as a robot at the end to help save Murphy. I think they had joked around with Nancy on the previous flicks that she should come back as a robot, but she instantly refused that idea. The movie apparently takes place 5 years after the events of RoboCop 2. OCP is on the verge of bankruptcy and have joined forces with a Japanese organisation called Kanemitsu to help continue their dreams of Delta City. To help speed up the process and to claw back the profits, they hire the help of an armed forces team called the Urban Rehabilitators, Rehabs for short, under the command of Paul McDaggett. There are news reports of the rehab team abusing their powers and forcing people onto the streets, but they claim they are handing out eviction notices and many people have been moved to new homes and new jobs, which in reality is far from the truth. Nico and her family are evicted from their homes, and she loses her parents in the chaos as the rehab team gathers up the locals who refuse to move. Nico is picked up by a small team of rebels who head to the weapons store, which is guarded by Ed 209. Nico, being the bright spark she is, hacks into the robot and manages to use it as her own personal guard. The police are alerted to the break-in and are taken back by the Ed 209. The rebels escape but catch the attention of Lewis and her colleagues. They chase after them but crash into another driver as the rebels remotely change the traffic lights. RoboCop continues the pursuit but receives calls for help from Lewis as a local gang called the Splatterpunks begin to close in on them. RoboCop comes to the rescue and scares off the punks, but unfortunately gets set on fire from 2 of the remaining punks. After arresting the thugs, he heads back to the station with Lewis and spots Nico entering a church. OCP want to get RoboCop on the rehab team and are concerned with him making his own decisions after he saved Lewis and ignored orders to pursue the escaping rebels. Dr. Lazarus takes care of Murphy and is reluctant to add a new chip that will block his instincts and make him more controllable to OCP, and she goes against their wishes and destroys the chip. The police force are trying to hunt down the rebels and highlight some key areas to search. RoboCop spots the church and heads out with Lewis. They locate some of the estranged civilians holding out inside the church, but the rehab arrive and want to take them away. RoboCop and Lewis refuse to let them in, so McDaggett shoots at Lewis and mortally wounds her, and she eventually dies, but she makes RoboCop swear to take revenge for her. Unable to fight back because of the 4th Directive programming, RoboCop is saved by members of a resistance movement composed of residents from Cadillac Heights, after he is heavily damaged in the chest, and he eventually decides to join them. Due to severe damage sustained in the shootout, RoboCop's system's efficiency plummets, and he asks the Resistance to find Dr. Lazarus, one of the scientists who created him. Upon arrival, she begins to treat him, deleting the 4th directive in the process. During an early raid on the armory, the Resistance picked up a jetpack prototype originally intended for RoboCop's use, which Lazarus modifies and upgrades for him. After recovering from his injuries, RoboCop conducts a one-man campaign against the rehabs and takes out their staging area at the police station. He then manages to locate McDaggett and attempts to subdue him, but McDaggett is able to escape at the last minute. Before RoboCop's arrival, McDaggett obtains information from a Resistance member regarding the location of the Resistance fighter's base. Phil Tippett returns to animate Ed 209. It's the same quality you would usually expect from him, but unfortunately Ed is hardly used and is just kind of played for laughs. It would have been cool to see the rehab team put him to good use. Some of the flight pack scenes I believe were also animated in puppet form for a couple of scenes, but the majority is traditional blue screen work. Some of the shots look okay in HD, but shooting with a daylight background against blue screen is always a difficult task. But I can't deny when he turned up to save the day, I did get a little excited as a kid. The gun arm was actually designed by Fred Decker himself. Fred walked into Rob's office and said I want his gun arm to look something like this, but Rob felt they couldn't do any better and felt it was a damn good design. I personally thought the gun arm looked cool. I remember when they introduced a new line of toys in '93, I desperately wanted the toy with the gun arm. Yeah, I know, I'm sad. For the Otomo Cyborg, they built a puppet for the close-up shot of him being hit with a lead pipe. He does have a Jack Nicholson style grin, and it's odd when the Cyborg gets hit they pull these cheesy grins, but when you see him for the first time, it does look very creepy. For the final shot, the two cyborgs chopping each other's heads off, you can tell the swords barely hit one another. Apparently the shot was rushed and wasn't set up properly, and only done in one take. RoboTeen had done a previous test on video, which apparently looked fantastic. RoboTeen also redesigns parts of RoboCop's suit, with the production reusing Peter Weller's outfit from number 2. The only changes made were to the jawline and neck piece, with Robert's neck being longer than Peter's. They also created some chest plates for the damaged suit later on in the movie. The fiberglass suit from number 2 was just resprayed. Some fans were unsure if the reports were true about them reusing the previous suits, but it was confirmed in the 1991 August issue of Starlog magazine. Pacific Data Images provided the CG to a couple of scenes in the movie. The first scene showing the future of Delta City, the dream sequence as you travel through Murphy's mind, and the morphing effects on his wife, Lewis, and Dr. Lazarus. This effect was also used in Willow, T2 and Star Trek VI. Basil Podoros is back to compose the score. Many fans were disappointed by his absence in RoboCop 2, and the score by Leonard Rosenman left many divided. Thankfully Basil brings back all the themes from the first film, and of course creates new themes for the Rehab team and the Japanese Cyborg. Basil speeds up the Robo theme and uses it a lot throughout the film, creating a very heroic-like theme for him. It very much plays out like a superhero score. The score was released at the time on CD but only contained roughly 30 minutes of music. There are many bootlegs floating around the internet of his complete score that is over an hour long. It certainly needs remastering and re-releasing in complete form, because the soundtrack is probably the best thing about the film. With the games arriving a year before the film's release, many RoboCop fans were left confused where the third movie was, but of course we loved RoboCop and wanted to play the game anyway. Ocean Software continued producing the RoboCop games for the 8-bit and 16-bit home computers, converting it to the Spectrum, Commodore 64, Atari St and Amiga. The Spectrum and Commodore 64 ports played the same, both starting out with a RoboCop POV scene with him shooting punks on windows. Then it goes into the traditional RoboCop style game in the form of a platform adventure. The ports did arrive quite late in the computers' lives and don't seem as polished as the original RoboCop game. Probe Entertainment handled the conversion on the NES. I never got a chance to play this version as a kid. It does actually have some nice graphics and the music isn't bad. There are a number of frustrating jumping levels and it's a bit tough, but certainly not a bad movie license. Now the 16-bit Atari St and Amiga versions were highly ambitious and praised heavily on release. With 3D graphics slowly working their way onto home computers at the time, RoboCop 3 has a distinctive look with its first-person style shooting sections and driving sequences. It wowed everyone at the time, considering it was coming from an Amiga and Atari St, but now obviously it looks extremely primitive and almost laughable. The game is nicely segmented with cutscenes and media break news reports. I think many found this game more enjoyable than the film, and the game felt closer to the original movie. Now, most people probably played the Super Nintendo version, which was ported over to the Mega Drive, Master System and Game Gear. The game is well known for its incredible difficulty. I managed to interview the animator who worked on the game, and he said only 4 people worked on it. They had just finished working on RoboCop 2 and weren't interested in doing another RoboCop game, and when they got the details over about the film's plot, they weren't impressed. The game was made very difficult on purpose by the coder of the game, because he apparently loved hard games and he felt it shouldn't be easy. Many of the levels and characters don't resemble anything in the film because they had no visual reference, just notes describing a number of scenes in the movie. The game is only for hardcore fans and people with a lot of patience. Fred Dekker felt the biggest problem was the screenplay, feeling he shot the wrong script. He felt the nature of the story, OCP driving people out of their homes, was too political. He describes the idea of RoboCop joining the rebels as a very left-wing move, and when the movie came out, people's attitudes were a lot more conservative. I think the main story of corporations making people homeless is still kind of relevant today, and Detroit itself has become the rundown city the RoboCop films depict. So the themes within this movie are strong, but I don't think this movie's political ideas put people off. The film unfortunately ruined Dekker's directing career. If you check his IMDb list, there are huge gaps in his lists of work, but he still had a career writing pilots and rewriting scripts. So he was getting work, however a lot of the productions he worked on never got to the filming process, but he still got paid. Fred has certainly been open about the film's problems and apologised for how it turned out, which is honest of him to say. He has taken a lot of the blame because he pretty much had full control and rewrote Frank Miller's script. Even though Fred's career derailed somewhat, many of the actors in the film you will recognise, and they have all gone on to have successful careers, so the movie certainly didn't affect them. The biggest problem I feel with RoboCop 3 is just a very dull film to watch. It's not awful by any means, but it's just so slow and nothing really fun happens. It just plods along. The action barely gets you excited. It has a car chase that is competently shot, but hardly leaves you impressed. When RoboCop squares off against a ninja cyborg, he's pretty much useless. He spends the majority of the time in the movie lying on his back. He gets taken out by the rehab team, then gets knocked over by the ninja when he first encounters him, and yet again gets knocked over by them at the end. In the first 2 movies he would kick some serious ass and put up a good fight, but in this he is robo-slob. Everyone gets annoyed with the PG-13 rating, so there is little to no gore in the film. Lewis has a few blood squibs on her, and RoboCop does kill a few people, but that's about it. The extreme violence is the backbone of RoboCop, and when that's gone, or when it's extremely diluted, it loses a lot of its character, and most certainly its appeal. RoboCop also doesn't feel like he's the star of his own movie. He seems like a secondary character, which is a big problem with Fred's script. The villains, Nico and Dr. Lazarus, take centre stage. RoboCop has hardly any dialogue and shows none of the emotions he exhibited in the previous films. It's like they totally ignored what happened. When Lewis died, what should have been an important part of the film, it's brushed over very quickly. I just wished he showed some anger and emotion. He had just lost his best friend. I feel Fred could have pushed the drama and emotions a lot more in this scene to make something truly memorable. Making Nico and Dr. Lazarus central characters was an obvious move to appeal to a female audience. You have the father instincts of RoboCop, and you have Dr. Lazarus replacing Lewis as the strong independent woman. It certainly tries its best to appeal to everyone, but it really forgets its core audience that loved the series in the first place. When the film came out, Jurassic Park had already set the world alight that year with its incredible effects, and heck, even Last Action Hero had well-staged action set pieces, leaving RoboCop heavily dated in its execution. It arrived too late to make an impression on the public. If it was released when it was originally intended, Terminator 2 had already been seen the year before and had already blown everyone away, so RoboCop 3 still would have struggled. The movie's set design lets it down big time. OCP's new boardroom looks okay and does the job, but everything just seems uninspired and bland. It has the most basic set dressing for each scene, like the bare minimum has been used. So it doesn't help the director of photography create an interesting style if the visual design of the sets lack any character. What do I honestly like about this film? Well, the score is fantastic, as I pointed out earlier, and easily the best piece of the movie. The humour, when it works, does work effectively. I love Rip Torn losing his temper, John Castle's hammy performance, and it's got a cameo by Shane Black, an extra point there. The scene where the cops quit their jobs and leave the station is nicely done, and seeing more Sergeant Reed is always a pleasure. The photography by Gary Kibbe does look nice in some places. It effectively copies the original film's look, especially near the beginning, but in other scenes the look of the movie seems cheap and flat, which isn't helped by the poor set design. RoboCop 3 has some nice ideas in it, and on paper you think it would make a great film. It certainly tries to be like the original, but due to the low budget and the director attempting to rewrite the screenplay himself, and of course the toned down violence, the dark nature of Miller's version and a lot of the magic of the original film is lost in this translation.
I want you to take your kids and anybody who shouldn't be fighting to the basement. The rest of you are hereby deputized by the Detroit Police Department. It's time to show how real cops kick ass.